What would you do if your child handed a stranger a simple drawing and that moment ended up changing your entire life? Before we begin, where in the world are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, because this story is one you'll want to remember. It started with crayons, a rainbow, stick figures, and a smiling sun drawn in the top corner. Just an ordinary picture from a 5-year-old girl named Ellie. The kind of drawing most people would smile at, then tuck away or forget. But the man she gave it to, he didn't forget, because that picture hit him in a place he didn't even realize had been lonely for a long, long time. Ellie was curious, bright-eyed, talked to everyone, the lunch lady, the receptionist, the crossing guard, and the janitor. He was quiet, always sweeping the same hallway, always listening. Most people didn't notice him, but Ellie did. One morning, she handed him the picture and said, "I drew this for you, so you won't be lonely anymore." She had no idea he was a billionaire, no clue that he was a founder and secret owner of the very company that had just laid off her mom. To her, he was just Mr. Joe, the nice man who always smiled back. But behind that uniform was a man with a story of his own. He'd built a business empire. He'd donated to hospitals, funded schools, vanished from headlines by choice. But this moment, it reminded him what truly matters. One child's kindness, one act of care, one drawing that would set off a chain of events more powerful than money or titles could ever buy. This isn't just a story about identity or generosity. It's about how we see each other and what happens when we finally decide to look a little closer. Ellie was 5, the kind of 5 that feels like sunshine with sneakers. She had messy pigtails, jelly stains on her sleeves, and a laugh that could echo down the longest hallway. She asked 100 questions a day and gave out hugs like they were stickers. Every morning, she clutched her purple backpack, 3 zippers, 1 broken, and walked into the school like it was her kingdom. And every morning, just past the front doors, was Mr. Joe, the janitor, always there, always sweeping, always smiling. He wasn't loud, didn't say much unless someone spoke first. But Ellie liked him. She said he had kind eyes, eyes that listened, even when his mouth stayed quiet. Most kids rushed past him. Some teachers nodded, some didn't. But Ellie, she stopped every single day. "Hi, Mr. Joe," she'd chirp, hand him a leaf she found or telling him about the squirrel she saw at recess. And every time, he'd pause, lean on his mop, and give her his full attention, like what she said mattered. And to her, that meant everything. She didn't know he lived alone, didn't know his phone rarely rang, didn't know he had no family pictures in his wallet, just an old photo of a dog long gone. To her, he was a nice janitor, the one who fixed the squeaky faucet in the girls' bathroom, the one who always wiped the lunchroom table just a little longer when she sat alone. And to him, Ellie was more than just a kid in a crowd. She saw him, not the uniform, not the broom, him. One morning, Ellie came in with a folded piece of paper, crayon lines everywhere, purple clouds, big smiles, a rainbow, and in the middle, 2 stick figures. One was wearing a dress, the other holding a mop. "I made it for you," she said, "so you won't be lonely anymore." He looked at it, and for a moment, the hallway was too quiet. His throat caught. He didn't know what to say, so he just nodded and carefully folded it back up like it was something priceless. And maybe it was because that little girl, without knowing it, had just given a man who owned everything something he never knew he was missing. Mr. Joe wasn't always Mr. Joe. Long before the mop, before the faded blue uniform, he wore suits tailored in Italy. He sat at boardroom tables with views from the 70th floor. His name used to echo in business magazines, whispered in investor calls, printed in headlines. But one day, he vanished. No scandal, no press release, just disappeared. He walked away from everything. His company, his title, the billion-dollar empire he'd built from scratch. People speculated. Burnout, maybe. Some said he lost someone. Others said he lost himself. But no one really knew, because Joe never told anyone, not even the people who worked beside him now, sweeping hallways and scrubbing cafeteria floors. To them, he was just a quiet janitor who showed up early and left late. But behind closed doors, his world looked very different. After school hours, Joe would take the long way home, not because he needed to, but because silence was easier to manage when the streets were full of strangers. He lived in a modest apartment, nothing flashy, but inside, tucked neatly behind an old bookshelf, was a small, hidden office. No dust on the desk, no clutter, just quiet power. On the walls, photos from children's charities, notes from foster care organizations, drawings from kids he'd never met, sent a man who'd quietly funded their school supplies, their surgeries, their second chances. Stacks of letters sat unopened, not because he didn't care, but because sometimes it hurt too much to read them. He never donated under his real name, always anonymous, always in the background, because to Joe, it wasn't about recognition. It was about redemption, about filling a silence he couldn't quite name. No one at the school knew, not the principal, not the staff, not Ellie's mom, who unknowingly worked for the very company Joe once built and would soon be laid off from. He saw her name in a report once, recognized it, felt something shift, but he said nothing until one small drawing from one small girl cracked something open inside him he'd tried to keep closed. That past he'd run from, it wasn't done with him yet, and neither was Ellie. He'd been given many things in his life, awards, bonuses, titles, recognition, but this little drawing from a girl who didn't even know his last name meant more than any of it. It was crumpled, slightly smudged, drawn in a rush of joy. A rainbow stretched across the sky. Two stick figures stood beneath it, one tall, holding a mop, the other small, in pigtails, both smiling. In the corner, scribbled in purple crayon, "To Mr. Joe, so you won't feel lonely anymore." He didn't say anything at first, just stared at the paper in his hands. It had been years since anyone gave him something just because. No agenda, no flattery, just a child's pure-hearted kindness. He blinked, once, twice, then carefully folded the picture like it was made of glass. That night, he didn't go straight home. Instead, he drove. No destination, just streets and streetlights, windows glowing with other people's lives. And in the passenger seat, her drawing, soft and small, but loud in his chest. It reminded him of something he hadn't thought about in years. His own childhood, a time when he used to draw just to feel seen, to be heard without speaking, to escape the noise at home and the silence that followed. He remembered his mother's voice. "Don't forget to give back, Joe. No matter how far you go, never forget what it's like to need." He had given back money, time, whole buildings named after causes. But somewhere along the way, he forgot what it meant to feel it, to connect. And now here it was, this messy, beautiful little picture, reaching into that hidden place he'd tried so hard to cover up. One picture, one child, one moment, and everything began to change. Life has a way of shifting, right when you think you're finally catching your breath. Ellie's mom, her name was Sarah, had been holding it together with the kind of quiet strength only single mothers truly understand. Early mornings, late shifts, packing lunches, balancing bills, smiling when it hurt. She never let Ellie see how tired she really was. But some storms don't knock first. One Wednesday afternoon, just after school pickup, she got the call. The company was downsizing. Her position was being eliminated. No warning. No room to argue. Just, "Thank you for your time." She hung up without saying a word. Sat in the car in the school parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel like it might hold her together. Inside, Ellie was in the back seat, kicking her legs, humming a tune, showing off a friendship bracelet she made with glitter glue. Sarah smiled, because that's what moms do. even when the floor is crumbling under their feet. Over the next few days, the worry started to settle in like cold air, the kind you can't shake. Groceries were suddenly more carefully chosen. Lights turned off quicker. The heating dialed back just a notch. At night, when she thought Ellie was asleep, Sarah would sit at the kitchen table, quietly scrolling through job boards, clicking, refreshing, and trying not to cry when the fridge buzzed louder than the silence in the room. Ellie didn't understand the details, but she knew something had changed. Mom's laugh was different. Her hugs felt longer. And once, she found her staring into space, hands still on the dish sponge, eyes far away. The next morning, Ellie walked into school quieter than usual, backpack slipping off one shoulder, eyes a little heavy. She stopped by the hallway where Mr. Joe always swept. He looked up and gave her the usual gentle smile. But this time, Ellie didn't speak. She just walked up, wrapped her arms around his legs, and held on tight. No words, no giggles, just a long, silent hug from a 5-year-old who didn't know how to explain what was wrong, but hoped anyone might feel it anyway. And Joe did. He felt it, like a weight, a signal, a shift in the wind that said, "It's time." Some people helped loudly, with cameras, applause, spotlights. But Joe moved like water, quietly, gently, but with purpose. That morning, after Ellie's hug, he didn't say a word. He just placed his mop back in the closet and walked to his car, a dusty old sedan that no one would ever guess belonged to a man worth millions. He didn't go home. He drove to a small office downtown, unmarked, bare, quiet, just like him. Inside, a single assistant looked up, eyes wide with surprise. "Sir, it's been a while." Joe nodded, pulled out a name, scribbled on the back of a sticky note. "Her name's Sarah," he said softly. "Single mom, recently laid off, smart, steady, overlooked." The assistant glanced at the note, then at Joe. "You want me to find her something?" "No," Joe replied. "I want you to find something she deserves." He didn't want favors, didn't want charity. He wanted dignity, opportunity, a door that opened without pity. By the end of the day, a call had gone out. One of the nonprofits Joe quietly funded, a foundation focused on education and family services, just happened to have a job opening. Communications manager, flexible hours, full benefits, on-site childcare. Her resume had already been forwarded, and her interview already scheduled. No red carpet. No clue who was behind it. The next morning, Sarah picked up a call from an unknown number. Almost didn't answer, but something told her to, and the voice on the other end, polite, professional, asking if she was still open to work. She thought it was a scam. It wasn't. It was a beginning. By the end of the week, she had a new job, one that paid better, respected her time, and, for the first time in months, gave her room to breathe. That Friday, Ellie came home to the smell of warm pasta, music playing softly in the background, and her mom dancing in the kitchen. It wasn't just a good day. It was hope, served in the form of dinner, and a smile that had finally returned home. And Joe, he never said a word. He just smiled a little deeper the next time Ellie ran to him in the hallway. And when she slipped another drawing into his hand, this one with a heart around both of them, he tucked it into his shirt pocket, right next to the first one. Some people step in like heroes. Others step in quietly and change everything. Sometimes the truth shows up not with fireworks, but with a microphone and a name no one expected to hear. It was a Friday morning. The school gym had been set up for a special assembly. Balloons, folding chairs, a plastic banner that read, "Thank you to our community partners." Most of the kids didn't care why they were there. Ellie was mostly excited about the juice boxes afterward. But the teachers, they were buzzing. Whispers about a donor, someone big, someone whose contribution had saved the school's art program and funded a brand new library wing. No one knew who it was, just that he'd asked to remain anonymous. Until today, The principal stepped up to the mic, cleared her throat, smiled that careful kind of smile people wear when they're about to drop a surprise. "We've been blessed," she said, "with an incredible donation from someone who believes deeply in children, in kindness, and in second chances." And today he asked to introduce himself. There was a pause. Then the doors at the back of the gym opened, and in walked Mr. Joe, in the same janitor uniform, the same calm face, mop not far behind. At first, no one clapped. They just stared, confused. A few students whispered. A teacher laughed, softly, awkwardly, like it had to be a joke. But Ellie stood up. "Mr. Joe!" she shouted, grinning, waving both arms. He smiled at her, then walked to the podium. Not rushed, not embarrassed, just steady. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, the kind of quiet people lean in to hear. "My name is Joseph Langston," he began, "and a long time ago, I started a company that I thought would help people. I built something big, something loud, something powerful. But somewhere along the way, I lost track of why I started in the first place." He looked around the room, eyes pausing on Ellie, then on Sarah, sitting a few rows back, frozen in disbelief. "So a few years ago, I stepped away. I put on a new name and a very old pair of shoes. And I came here to listen again, to learn what matters." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a crayon drawing, a rainbow, 2 stick figures. "This," he said, voice catching just slightly, "reminded me why I do what I do." Silence filled the room, no longer confused, now just quiet, reverent. Sarah brought her hand to her mouth. Ellie beamed like her whole heart was glowing. Mr. Joe, or rather Joseph Langston, smiled once more, not for the cameras, not for credit, but because, in that moment, he wasn't a billionaire or a janitor or a mystery. He was simply a man who'd been seen by a child and had finally decided to be seen by everyone else. The assembly ended, but no one really left. They stayed in their seats, like they were still catching up to what their hearts had just witnessed. For days, Mr. Joe, or Mr. Langston as they now knew him, was all anyone could talk about. The janitor who swept the halls, who knew every corner of the school, had quietly been changing lives the entire time. But the part that stuck with people wasn't the money, or the title, or the surprise. It was the way he stayed. Even after the reveal, he didn't quit. He didn't ride off into the sunset. He showed up the next Monday, with the same keys, the same mop, and the same smile for Ellie by the water fountain. That day, Sarah waited by the school fence after pickup. She watched as Ellie skipped ahead, arms swinging, backpack bouncing. Mr. Joe stepped out just as they were leaving. "Hi," she said softly. He nodded. "Hi." "I didn't know," she whispered. "You weren't supposed to," he said. A pause. Then, "But I knew about you long before the layoffs." She looked down. Embarrassed? Maybe. Grateful? Definitely. It was hard to tell where one emotion ended and the next began. "Thank you," she said finally. Her voice cracked a little. Not just for the job, but for seeing her, for being kind. He looked at Ellie, now spinning in circles in the grass, and something softened in his expression. "She saw me first," he said. "Sometimes that's all it takes." Sarah smiled, not the polite kind, the real kind, the one that says, "I get it. I feel it too." Ellie ran up then, holding a new drawing, another rainbow. This time, there were 3 stick figures. Her, Mr. Joe, and her mom. In crayon, she'd written, "You're not lonely anymore." Joe knelt down, took the picture with both hands, and pressed it gently to his chest. No words, just a quiet nod, because some thank yous don't need to be spoken out loud. They live in moments, in gestures, in the quiet kind of love that doesn't need credit, just connection. Sometimes it's the smallest moments that echo the loudest. A crayon drawing, a hallway hug, a janitor who was never just a janitor, and a child who didn't see a billionaire, or a title, or a past. She saw a person, lonely, kind, worthy of love, and that was enough to change everything. We chase big gestures. We wait for the right time, the perfect conditions, the right words. But maybe kindness doesn't need a plan. Maybe it just needs to be real, to be noticed. One picture, one hand reaching out, one quiet man finally remembering what it feels like to be seen. So if you're still watching, maybe there's someone in your life who's been invisible for too long. Someone who shows up every day and quietly carries more than you know. Maybe today is the day you say something, or simply smile, or draw a silly little rainbow, because you never know when the smallest act of love will become someone's turning point. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Heartfelt Tales TV for more true stories that remind us what really matters. Thanks for being here. Be kind, be curious, and never underestimate what a child's heart can teach a grown-up soul.